Thanks, Nicholas. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. In the interest of time, I will charge through this, but dwell on a few points, particularly the exploration and to a lesser degree the consolidation going on in the Leonora area. I think Kin has a pretty simple story and a fairly obvious investment thesis. So I'm interested to get some feedback from some of the listeners today at the booth, just at the very end where you come in through the main glass doors. So I'll be there for the remainder of the 2 days. The investment snapshot, we are an ASX listed company. 41% of the shares are owned by large investment group Delphi out of Germany, 13% by St Barbara. We have 1.4 million ounces in resource and a resource upgrade coming in the June quarter. We have an ongoing exploration program, particularly at our Cardinia project, which has been regularly delivering new discoveries over this last 18 months where we've been operating there. We're well funded with 14 million cash and investments, and we have development optionality for those projects with 3 processing plants within 80 kilometres, of which 2 are underutilised currently. And we have a strategic position in the heart of the Leonora consolidation. I'll return to this picture at the back end of the presentation to try and put some colour around the consolidation in Leonora. Needless to say, it's been one of the hottest tickets in the region for the last couple of years. Kin has 2 projects, the Desdemona project on that Leonora-Gwalia trend, and a second larger project called Cardinia, which is out on the Maneri Greenstone Belt, 30 kilometres to the northeast of Leonora. So they're the 2 main projects that we have. It's a 700 plus square kilometre ground holding, the second largest ground holding of any of the players in that Leonora region. Capital structure, we're about a $44 million company. As I mentioned, cash and investments of 14, so that gives us an enterprise value of 30 million, and with 1.4 million ounces due to be upgraded, we're valued at about $20 an ounce. Now, you can't explore and find gold for that kind of price in today's environment, so that's why the majors are all out shopping, and you've seen a number of those transactions in this last 3 or 4 months. The reason the majors are out shopping for additional resources because they can buy it cheaper than they can explore and find it themselves. You can see our share price, like many of the juniors, we've been on a declining share price for a bit of time now, and that's a function of the market where the rising gold price has attracted investors to producers, but my expectation, having been in the industry for about 35 years now, is that will trickle down to the smaller end of town as the gold price matures over this next 6 months or so. Management team, experienced, operations-based, capable and focused. We've had the same stable team for a number of years now. From the exploration side, so this is the Cardinia project in the centre of the screen on the Maneri Greenstone Belt. We're the largest landholder on the Maneri Belt. It's a relatively immature belt, so there's lots of exploration and discovery opportunity here. We have 1.2 million ounces in that Cardinia project at the moment, and as you can see on the slide, another 200,000 ounces at a project called Rayside, just 5 or 6 kilometres outside Leonora. And I'll spend a little bit more time on this Cardinia project. So this is a snapshot of the western side of Cardinia. It's a combination of relatively shallow, narrow to moderate intersections at significant grade. There's a raft of them there that I've put on in black that have all been drilled in the last 18 months, and they range from 4 metres to 16 metres, all above 4 grams per tonne. But between those higher grade intersections, you get these broad zones of low grade mineralisation. So the 22 metres at 0.76 and 14s and 15s at a bit better than a gram are the typical kind of things that you see. In previous years, there are up to 50-metre intersections at about a gram. So the Bruno Lewis deposit, where most of those are centred, has a very low stripping ratio when mining. It's broad zones, but it's relatively low grade at being about 1.5 grams. But it's all very, very shallow. You can see the depth of the intersections there on the screen. Now, the vast majority of the drilling here is down to only 75 metres vertical. And that Bruno Lewis deposit sits in a very large gravity low, and for the geologists in the audience, that should prick up their attention. And that gravity low is there because of the mineralisation that has reduced the density of the rocks, and that gravity low extends for another 4.5 kilometres to the north of Bruno Lewis, with very little exploration on it. There's a little amount at a project called Pelsart, a kilometre or so north of Bruno Lewis, but I think that whole western corridor north of Bruno Lewis for another 4.5 k's is an exciting opportunity for us. On the eastern corridor, and this is only a couple of kilometres east of where we were looking at the western side, it's a slightly different style of mineralisation, so steep, high-grade type of lodes, more typical of your Eastern Goldfields style. Relatively narrow, 3 to 10 metre intersections of plus 5 gram type material, occasionally spectacular things which are 35 or an ounce or more, or in one case 7 or 8 ounces of gold to the tonne. But again, there are wider zones of, again, lower grade material in things called linking structures that link all these steep structures together. So where you see those 4 or 5 deposits with the 5 and 10 gram intersections, as I've illustrated on the slide, there are linking structures that connect all those together, some of which are quite deep, but others of which, as an example, the 43 metres at a gram is only from 39 metres. So I think this eastern corridor is a bit of a story in the making still. We're out there drilling another round of work at the moment to the north of that Rangoon project, see if we can extend that Rangoon deposit a little bit further to the north. To illustrate that in the third dimension, so this is the Rangoon Helens structure. It's about 3 kilometres long now. It has 4 or 5 high-grade chutes within it. The pink illustrations that all dip to the north, and the drilling here is down to about 125 vertical so far. Deepest hole I think is about 150. So while it's deeper than on the western corridor, it is still relatively shallow. So the program here is to extend to the north of the discoveries so far, see if we can discover any more high-grade chutes, and then come back to this and drill this out to 150 to 180 vertical, which I think is the sort of the economic depth of open pits at these sort of grades. So it's quite a developing story, this Helens Rangoon and the Eastern Corridor in general. Had some success there recently with an RC drilling program, but this program that's running at the moment should, I think, reveal where these additional high-grade chutes are. I'll touch quickly on geophysics. We had a little bit of success with some geophysics, excuse me, and a technique called IP, which is good for seeing sulfides. We drilled a hole on a completely barren geophysical profile that we did, got 2 gold intersections, 0.6 of a metre at 30 grams, and then down 266 metres downhole, 2.5 metres at 3 grams in a sulphide-rich zone, which showed up in the IP. So IP seems to work particularly well for mapping at depth where this sulphide-based mineralisation goes. Sulphides always lead to questions of metallurgy. All the test work that we've done, and we've done multiple phases of test work now, all the oxides on all the tests average 94.5% recovery in the oxide and transitional zone. The Western Corridor is almost exclusively oxide and transitional. The Eastern Corridor is a bit more sulphide based. and the best results that you get out of the metallurgy on sulphide type ores are through flotation and regrind and then leach. You get between 91% and 97% recovery if you do that. But it requires regrinding of the sulphide flotation concentrate. You can see the distribution of the gold is quite fine in many of those microphotographs. There's a few chunky bits in amongst it, which are these one on the bottom right-hand panel. They're the kinds of things that we think give these ounce intersections in the drilling. Mass recovery in the float concentrates, 10.5%. So if you put 1 million tonnes of that kind of ore into a concentrator, you get 107,000 tonnes of concentrate out at 27 grams gold, a similar amount of silver, and you get some copper and molybdenum and lead and zinc and tellurium credits. Development options, and this is one of the questions I always get asked: when are you going to develop this thing? As I mentioned, there's 3 processing plants, 2 of which are underutilised within 80 k's of us. So there's a potential partner development with one of those players. But we could also go to standalone operation if that's in the best interest of shareholders and the best value for money. But that would require, in my view, an upgrade of the mineral resource above 1.5 million ounces from the 1.4 that we currently have. We have some of the hardware, but I think we'll probably be going new for the vast majority if we go standalone operation. Consolidation in the Leonora region, and as I mentioned, it's been one of the hot topics. There's lots of moving parts in this, and they've been moving for the best part of 2 or 3 years now. Dacian purchased NTM to the north of us in 2021. St Barbara purchased 19% of Kin. St Barbara also purchased Bardock, which is 150 kilometres south of Gwalia, south of Leonora. Raleigh Finlayson arrived in the scene and restructured Genesis and did a very successful job so far on that. Genesis purchased Dacian, Kin purchased 10% of Dacian, and now, after Red 5 have commissioned their King of the Hills operation in the northern part of Leonora, Genesis and Silver Lake have both bid circa between 600 and 650 million for the Gwalia assets of St Barbara. So there's still plenty of action there, and then there's still other things to happen. However, in my experience, these things are never smooth and never linear. There's always lumps and bumps along the way, and I expect this to be no different. Why is there so much action? There's 20 million ounces between the main players there at 2.1 grams, and there's 9 to 10 million tonnes if you can get all those processing plants under the same umbrella. So that Leonora area can produce northwards of 600,000 ounces a year at very competitive costs if we're able to get it all under reasonable cooperation. 600,000 ounces a year would be a top 5 Australian gold producer. So in summary, we're an advanced explorer developer. As I mentioned, 1.4 million ounces. We're in a modest exploration program at the moment, demonstrating that this Eastern Corridor has some higher grade and more extensions than what we've been able to define so far. We've moved to operational readiness, so a couple of our projects are already permitted, ready to go once a contractor is appointed and a processing plant access is negotiated. And as I mentioned, the consolidation in the Leonora region is alive and well and underway and hasn't been finished yet. So happy to take, as I mentioned, questions out of the booth over the next day or two, but thank you very much for your attention.
Thanks.